Hello everyone, it is Caitlin, and today we are making an 1840s wrapper. Alright, so we're going to be working with this book today, and it has pictures of a lovely original wrapper from the 1840s. The book is called Civil War Era, but then it says like 1840, 1870, and like that's not the Civil War era, that's like the first half of the Victorian era, at least call it that, but okay, whatever. But this is the wrapper we're going to be working with, and this is what it looks like, the original. So Martha McCain did a lovely, not really a pattern, but kind of based it out like that. So we're going to be working from that today. Of course, just making it for my size. And because I already made this up before, I made it up and then halfway through hand stitching the whole thing, realized that the fabric wasn't correct because although I had documented the floral sprigs, there were these tiny little stars dotted just haphazardly among the fabric, and my brain didn't see them before, and those were not correct. So the fabric was not going to be right for the 1840s, and so that was my mock-up per se. And so now I'm ready to make the real thing. So we have, which is going to be our fabric today. It's a little semi-sheer, but it's really nice. It'll be light and a really good wrapper, I think. Alright, so for my hem, I need about 46 inches long, and that's going to give me about 2.5 inches turn under. And then, yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this. This fabric is about 56 inches wide, so like 55 when I sew it up. And the original is somewhere around 73, or at least the back portion is like 73 inches wide. So I'm thinking about 1.5 panels of this. I'm thinking about just taking one panel and ripping it in half, and then having another half panel, and just having 3 separate panels, which is what she did in the original. Her panels are not even; it's more like 2 panels and like a 3/4 inch, and then a 3/4 panel. I'll just do 3 panels; it'll be easier for me. And I have an extra panel here. Because I've already made this, I already have my pattern pieces that are cut to my size. Let's see if this will actually fit on this. I need to cut the front skirt panels, and so it needs to be exactly as wide as my bodice here. So my bodice is 25 inches exactly. That helps. And this one needs to be slightly taller, but I'm not turning it under the 2 inches, so I'm going to cut this one 43.5 inches. And there's 2 front panels. So now all we need is the sleeves. Alright, step 1 in sewing, we're going to go right ahead and stitch up the seams here on the skirt. I find that originals tend to use a running stitch on the skirt and like back stitches in all the important parts like bodices. So we're going to do a very quick running stitch. Probably right at the selvage so I don't waste any fabric, but I don't see the selvage. Trying to keep my stitches fairly small-ish. Alright, I got a little bit of prep work done so that we can get working. So I have the belt here, this belt lining actually, and I went ahead and put some boning channels in there because the belt is boned. I think the original has it boned twice. I'm thinking about doing it 3 times because I had to both lengthen and widen the belt quite a bit. So I'm thinking just because there's more space there, it needs a little bit more structure. And so I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm just going to, and I'm going to attach these with a basic running stitch. I think we'll be able to hold that in. I also prepped the sleeves. I also here the front of the wrapper, I ran a gathering stitch across the front, and there's the back here, and I just attached them. So I'm going to go back stitch across here, to be a little bit more secure. And when we get the belt done, we can do the sides back stitch as well, but I need to get the belt done first because the belt is attached to the side seam. So I'm going to finish the belt and work on this. Alright, I boned the belt pieces, and so we're going to go ahead and put the fastener fabric on top. Then I made some piping, and we're going to put the piping over top of this. And this is just going to get stitched in the ditch right here, all the way around. And then we're going to come back, fold it over, fold this down, and stitch it like that so we have a nice clean edge on that side, and it looks like that from the front. So we're at the point in the bodice where we stitch it up the sides. I did put neckline piping on, just regular piping all the way around. And I think hers stopped like right here, but I wanted to make sure it was going to be covered with the belt, so I went ahead and went to the very end of the bodice here. I stitched together one side just to make sure it's going to work. And we have this essentially. So I don't have notes on the original exactly how they stitched this up, but just knowing how originals I have seen have been sewn up, I've noticed a predominance of skirts being done with running stitches and bodices, particularly on seams that are going to take some strain, being back stitched. So I'm going to go right ahead and back stitch this. Alrighty, so let's attach some sleeves. So I have here the bodice, which is essentially done for the most part. So there's piping in the bottom now. This is the bottom back. Of course, we added piping all around the belt, and there's boning in the belt, and there's piping here. I went ahead and basted on the piping in the arm side. So now we're ready to attach actual sleeves. So I have here the sleeve, which of course is cut on the bias, and I piped in the very corner, in the very bottom down here. So we're just going to attach this. So I went ahead and marked where this seam, because this seam usually runs where the elbow is, so I marked where the elbow kind of met my arm on the wrapper itself. And we're going to line up the seam on here. Right on here. And I basted that pipe again, so now I have a nice little seam line of exactly where to stitch, where I'm not sewing too far into my piping where you see a lot of piping, and I'm not sewing over where you don't see the piping. Now the original was not lined with white like I did. I chose white merely because the fabric is semi-sheer, and I wanted a cohesive line between, you know, the lining and, say, the petticoats I wear underneath it and that sort of thing. So I went with white, but that's not necessarily a necessity. I think the original actually uses 6 different lining fabrics because the lady was literally just making do with what she had. And so like the sleeves are lined with a totally different cotton than the, you know, bodice was, and then there's like I think one side of the bodice has a different color brown cotton than the other bodice side of the bodice has, and there's like 2 or 3 fabrics that are in the facing. She was really just making do with the scraps that she had. And I believe you should actually back stitch sleeves. I almost always do a running stitch, which is probably not right. I'll have to go back and like look at the originals, but they're both up in the closet right now, and I don't feel like getting them out. They're in storage. I had the one on display for a while in the sewing room, but I try not to do that very often just because, you know, they're getting light from the window and dust on them. So whenever they do display them, I display them for just a week or a couple weeks, and then they go back into storage. But it's always good to get them out and make sure that they are, you know, moved around, that they don't get creases from where you're folding them, and it's good to get them out, but they don't need to be staying out, basically. But right now, both of them are up. I've never had an issue with these coming out, though, so basically until I start having issues with, you know, doing a running stitch on the sleeves. I'm probably going to keep doing a running stitch on the sleeves. So on the front side we're seeing this. So it's just a little bit of piping right here and then this. I'm not actually a huge fan of piping on the arm side. I don't know, I don't mind doing piping on the neckline or on the waistline, but for some reason doing piping in the arm side really irks me. And I don't know why, but it's not my favorite thing to do. But it was almost universal back then, so which is why I do it. Although there is actually a dress in the Bell County Museum, which is the museum I used to work at when I was in college. And they actually have a dress that's from the 1840s, actually. And it has no piping in the arm side. I think I've seen out of, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of original gowns that I've either viewed in person or online. I think there's maybe 7 or 8 that I've seen without piping. And so, yeah, it was really interesting to see because I didn't remember that from the last time I viewed that dress. It's a silk dress, actually. It's beautiful, beautiful silk. But I think at one time it was purple. It looks brown now. It's just absolutely beautiful. It looks very similar in style to the black silk dress from the 1850s that I have. Like it has that waistband and it's gathered, but her lining is structured as a darted lining and there's boning in there. But yeah, she has no piping on the arm side, which I thought was very interesting. I didn't remember that detail from last time I saw her. I really considered not putting the piping in this one just because I have that example from Texas, from my area, but it's almost universal. And the wrapper I'm copying had piping, so yeah, I get the purpose, but just because I get it doesn't mean I have to like it. So I think our next step is we're going to add the closures. So I think the original had a closure on the had a hook and eye basically on the top, I think like right here-ish. And then the only other closures on the gown were not hooks but eyes on the belt, and then you would lace something through the belt. So I'm thinking not adding the hook and eye here, at least as of right now. I think I'll probably just close it with a brooch or something for right now. Then eventually if I wanted to I could, oh here's Cat. Eventually if I wanted to I could add a hook and eye here later. So I think what we're going to do right now is just add the eyes to the belt, which I think she used 5, but I think I might do 7 just because I had to extend the belt this way for my torso length. So yeah, I think I might do 7 instead of the 5. So I have my little eyes here. I'm going to just do, and what I want is I want them to peek out like that. So I'll probably put them on the edge of the piping and just stitch this in. So both sides of the belt are going to have the eyes. There's not going to be any hooks, so I'm just going to lace it. I think I shall need about 14 eyes. I'll go sew those on, at which point I believe we're ready to attach the skirt. Let's attach the bodice to the skirt now. So I have all that put in. There's my hooks, and there's the other side where the hooks are. So I don't know if it's easier to put the gauging to the back first and then stitch the fronts, or do the fronts and then do the back. I think I'm going to start with the front. And in theory, this should be exactly the width of, yes, okay, cool. So now that that is done, we can take all of this fabric and put it into this. We're going to keep pulling until it's basically the size of the back. And I'll start on one end. Each of these little pleats needs to be whipped into the ditch of the piping. So this is where the stitching is. This is where the stitching is on the piping. I need to whip each one of these little pleats individually into the waistband. That looks pretty good. So this is kind of what it looks like from the front. Kind of see where I gauged, and that looks like it's going to hold pretty well. So we'll keep doing that. I'm just going to put a little piece of fabric. This is also going to weigh down my skirt because my cotton is very, very light. I don't want it to ride up my petticoats, so it's going to weigh it down quite a bit to have this heavier cotton on the hem. Very last step, we're going to put on the rest of the spacing. So I add it, I iron it up, and we're just going to do basically a running stitch, but I'm taking small bites out of the front side of the fabric and longer bites out of the back. So the front, you should barely see it. And in a plaid like this, it's easier to hide. And as soon as this gets done, we'll be ready to try it on. I have to figure out what I'm going to close it with as far as ribbon. I have the silk ribbon, but I don't think it's really good lacing material. I'm thinking the best bet would be to use some silk satin ribbon, because that'd be a little sturdier than what I have. So we'll use what I have now, and then I might never make another order of silk satin ribbon for timely tresses. I will order some more, probably blue I think would be the best bet. And here's the completed wrapper. I think it turned out really cute. I really like the plaid. Of course, blue is my favorite color, so of course I love that. It really does look like an 1840s dress just because of the belt. Like, it just adds that shaping that you would see in an 1840s gown, which is really nice because it's kind of like a hybrid dress. I'm not wearing a brooch right now. I just pinned it shut with a straight pin, and you see it holds perfectly well. So I don't think I'm going to ever add a hook and eye there. If I can just pin it shut real quick and have it stay, I think this is perfectly acceptable. I do need to find a better ribbon because the silk ribbon I have is not very sturdy. I don't think it's going to last a lot of wearing, so right, it is what I'm using right now. I do like the blue ribbon, so I think I'm going to stick with the blue. But yeah, I am wearing a corset with this because of the structure here. You could wear it without, I think. But generally, when I wear my wrappers, it's I wear my wrapper for two reasons. One is I'm not quite ready to get fully dressed. I'm going to breakfast, so I'll just put on, you know, chemise, corset. I'll put on all my clothes, but then I'll just put on a wrapper and I can go, you know, loosely laced to breakfast, kind of wake up a little bit before going out and get like fully dressed. And this is nice because I can get dressed in it myself. It doesn't close up the back, which I think will help a lot in that situation too. Is just getting dressed first thing in the morning, not having to worry about it, and then getting dressed when I have someone to, you know, help me with that. At some point I might need to shorten the sleeves. I forget that I have very short arms, and so like everything I have to like shorten by at least 3 or 4 inches. So right now they almost go to my fingertips. Very close. My thumb's hidden. So eventually that'll be a thing I can do, but it's not really a big deal, and like I can pull it up and they don't bother me, so I'm going to leave it the way it is right now. As far as what I have on, I have my chemise, corset, and I have 3 petticoats on right now. You can kind of see the floof. I did not put on my corda petticoats, so there's not quite as much floof, but there's floof, and so I think this is an acceptable amount of floof if I was going to breakfast or whatever. So yeah, an acceptable amount of floof. There's more floof in the back because of all the gauging, and there is less room out front, which doesn't seem to be an issue so far. Maybe if I was doing it again, I'd add a little bit more here and here, just because I am wider than the original lady, and I didn't really think of that. So that might be something to consider. So, but it's still like gathery, and it's still gathered up here, so I think it's acceptable. It's just far more fabric in the back than, you know. Oh, I never explained like the other reason I'd wear a wrapper. I said, okay, breakfast, and then also like at nighttime when I'm wearing my nightgown or whatever, and I just need something to put on over my nightgown if I was going out. Particularly if I'm unpacking for an event, I get there at night, I'll put on nightgown or chemise or something and a wrapper, and I'll go take trips back and forth to my car. So that's the other reason I wear a wrapper, and in that case I would not wear a corset with it. It's just something to cover up the night dress so I'm more presentable. But yeah. So I love the bias that we did bias here. I think that worked out really well. I think that's a very 1840s technique that they would use. They loved things on the bias, especially they loved playing with plaid. And so, yeah, a section that is bias is very 40s. And of course the sleeves are biased as well, so that works as well. So, yeah, I'm actually very happy with it. And unfortunately, it looks like my 1840s event for this year is canceled, which was supposed to be coming up in like 2 or 3 weeks, which is why I was making this dress now. But it's not surprising. I wasn't surprised to hear that it was canceled. I actually just found out about 10 minutes ago because I finally emailed somebody about it. So that doesn't really surprise me, but it's still kind of a little disheartening. But I'll have it done for next year. They are willing to do it next year, so no pockets in this one. I did ask a friend of mine that I know from the Texas Living History Association, Marna Davis, who collects wrappers and like work dresses of the 19th century, and she says her 1830s wrapper does not have a pocket, but her later 1840s one does. So she thought I could go either way. I ended up not putting a pocket in just because the original that I was copying didn't. And I usually don't use pockets all that much anyway. If I wanted to, I could open up one of these seams because my uppermost petticoat has pockets in the seams. So it's just giant squares sewn into my petticoat and I can reach into my pocket. So all I'd have to do is take this seam here and open up a slit and I could reach into a pocket that's in my petticoat. So I didn't really feel like that was totally necessary. The pocket idea I actually got from the Workwoman's Guide. It said instead of making separate pockets, you could put them in your petticoats. Which I found, which I kind of like that idea because every time I think of separate pockets, I think of Lucy Lockett lost her pocket, and I'm like, I don't want to lose my pockets because I keep very important things in them. So I like the idea of having it attached to a garment where it wouldn't just like fall off if I didn't tie a tight enough knot. So yeah, that's the story of why I put pockets in my petticoat, and I actually have two. I have one on each side. Because I tend to carry a lot of things, and they're very deep. I mean, I followed the Workwoman's Guide instructions, so like their pockets were like this big. But I followed her specifications exactly, so it's how big she meant them to be. I think she only had them on one side instead of two. I just ended up doing two. I thought at some point I do have to go back and redo them because I put them too low. I followed her specs, but then again, I have short arms, and I didn't process that I wouldn't be able to reach down into my pocket. I need to move it up like 4 inches. So I can actually reach into my pocket. So maybe eventually we'll do that. And I can explain more about the pocket in the petticoat process. But yeah, I'm very happy with how the wrapper turned out. I think it's adorable. Definitely not something I would normally make because it's cotton, but I actually do enjoy working with cotton. So probably do that a little bit more often. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me in my little 1840s adventure. And I will see you in the next video.